Okay, we're going to start. We're just a few 4 or 5 minutes late here, but punctual. And I want to start off. This is a Braver Angels of Klamath County event, our first one, basically, and actually premature in the sense that we are not a formal alliance yet, but we will be this week. Kristen Clark is my co-chair. Braver Angels requires that for an alliance to be formed, there needs to be a blue or a liberal-oriented person and a red, a conservative-oriented person. And I feel honestly blessed to have been led to Kristen. Todd Gessley, who is here, recommended people's rights as a source to approach. And it is a conservative group, and that's what I was looking for. And Kelly Minty also recommended that I find Kristen.
Our county commissioner.
Yeah, a county commissioner. And so here she is, and she actually volunteered before I had a chance to bend her arm. And she's the best, I believe, the best co-chair in the state and perhaps in the country, but that's maybe going too far. But in terms of expressing appreciation, I want to especially thank Klamath Film Society and Kurt Lidke, who is here, busily handling the technology. We have 3 cameras and lights and 3 mics, and a lot going on that we would never be able to do here with our little group of 2 or whatever we are, and the 6 of us. So we thank everybody for that, and also I should note that there's an audience or observers, about 12 people, roughly divided, I think, in terms of political orientation, noting, however, I think it's fair to say there are more conservatives or reds than the other, and that is consistent with my impression of the activism and involvement of the different sides, but that's all kind of off track. And we've asked that the audience hold their enthusiasm, and we'll have time at the end for discussion and other questions, and hopefully discuss how to proceed together in this thing. So I want to, we are discussing elections, and I hope we do not dwell on the 2020 issue. That is behind us. I hope we focus on the future and how we cooperate for Klamath County to assure that we have elections we trust. That, I think it's about trusting our elections. And if this goes well, our modest little objective is to show the nation how it can be done. And hopefully we can show how each county, all 3,400 or whatever parishes, can do this. Hopefully it works. That we, in Klamath County, we have an election process that people are satisfied with and trust. One final statement here. This is under the banner of Braver Angels, but who is it they say who goes where angels fear to tread? I'm afraid it's me. I don't want to make too much of a fool of myself, but this Braver Angels advice is for the parties to become acquainted with each other, familiar, and trust each other before something like this happens. I had envisioned this being a non-filmed event and the 6 of us doing it in private to try it out, but if this goes well, I'm glad it's going the way it is, and I appreciate the audience, the participants here, and hope this goes forward. So, Kristen, I'll turn it over to you for a quick statement.
So yes, like Chuck, I also feel like this is a great opportunity to really get to know each other and understand each other. Our desire is not to change anyone's mind, but understand each other better so that we can come together, work together in solving the problems of the future. So I'm just super excited that Chuck did find me and that we are this conglomeration of working together moving forward. I, so far in Braver Angels, have really valued the opportunities I had for their training as well as the opportunities to meet some people that aren't in my, as Monica will say, in my silo, in my tribe, because I do surround myself with very like-minded minds. And so this has been a great opportunity to really understand how the other sees it. And on that note, our panel members will introduce themselves in a minute, but Seth Friedman, who is a professor of negotiation and conflict management, they all got to watch a short video, and he just reiterates the 3 Ps of paraphrasing and praising and probing. So after our 2 sides, and we'll flip a coin to decide who goes first, they'll get to present a problem and a solution, and then they will have the other side will have a couple of questions they can ask, clarifying questions. And in doing those questions, we hope there's paraphrasing, some praising before the probing, and all of this is more of a, I want to understand you better, where you're coming from. Not necessarily, we don't expect any changing of minds, but just more clarification and understanding. So, that being said, I think I'll turn it back to you are you introducing the speaker, the
Well, I want to make another quick statement, if I can, that I was kind of challenged yesterday in a whole separate conversation about where Braver Angel stands politically. And, it's definitely a political operation, but it very much advocates for, I don't know if it's bipartisanship or maybe like Unitarianism, accepting all to the extent possible. I mean, in my view, it's if you want to get guns and bulletproof vests or something, we don't want you involved, but just about anybody else is welcome, and to discuss issues and do that respectfully and civilly and constructively. We're all individuals. We all have our own views. We all hold them strongly. And anyway, yeah, so I've got a bunch of notes here I'm going to skip over, but I mentioned already how what we're doing is rather daring compared to what Braver Angels advocates. I note in terms of human nature that human beings are the most complicated thing known in the universe, that we have been raised from an evolutionary point of view to be hyper-vigilant and looking out for dangers, and no longer do we have to worry about lions, tigers, and bears, and snakes and spiders, but we are very vigilant about our reputations and our egos. We are very defensive in that sense and very much want to hold our beliefs, and I think you get my point. So with all that said and skipped, we've adopted a motto by Kiva Sugarman that I think is telling. I ain't mad at nobody, and I can promise you that it's been in the last year that I decided I was tired of being angry and listening to my side of the media telling me how much to distrust you and fear you. So I'm feeling better about it. So we the people get down to business here, and let's imagine this is the basement of a courthouse in Philadelphia in 1789 or something, and consider how the issues those people undertook that were, I believe, as contentious as the ones we have today. Thank you.
Can we introduce ourselves?
Yeah, so I will take 1 minute each for my team to introduce themselves.
My name is Faith Leith. I'm a member of the Unitarian Church here, and that's why I was able to arrange this with the Quakers to have the meeting here. And I've been involved in politics for many, many years, and I'll go into, when I present my issue, I'll go into more about who I am.
Thank you, Faith. And by the way, she's the one who arranged for this space and helped set it up. So thank you, Faith.
I'm Jonathan Shinjeri. I teach history at Klamath.
What was it? Your name?
Jonathan Shinjeri. Excuse me.
I'm sorry, I still couldn't hear you.
Jonathan Shinjeri.
Jonathan.
Yeah,
Okay.
John's fine. I teach history at our high school here at Klamath Union. I'm also the Democratic candidate for the House of Representatives in District 56, and I've been here about 5 years or so. So that's my background.
Thank you. I was looking for a couple liberals, and here they are.
And then go ahead, the conservative side.
Okay, I'm Rita Vining, and I don't know what else to tell you. I've been involved in canvassing. I've been involved in canvassing for the last year. That means going door to door to see how many people, according to the Secretary of State's walking list, is still living and residing at these residences. And I'm finding quite a few anomalies. Go ahead.
I'm Brenda Toshik, and I have not done anything with politics until about the last 2 years. And I hate to bring it up, but 2020 opened my eyes to a lot of things, and I started looking into it. And when my youngest son said he doesn't vote because he doesn't trust it anymore, that is a problem. So I recently became a PCP, and I also have been doing canvassing and seeing a lot of anomalies that this needs to get cleaned up. We need to bring the trust back into our elections, because if we no longer have good, clean elections, fair elections, where our votes really count, where we know that our votes count, we're no longer going to have our democratic republic. And that's what I'm afraid of. I don't want to lose it. And I'm tired of the infighting, because people aren't really talking. They're just assuming things about each other. That's got to stop.
Thank you.
My story.
So,
Okay,
Oh,
should
you
we
got a
flip
coin,
the coin?
okay.
Do you want me to flip it?
sure.
Okay.
Call heads or tails?
Yeah.
So who's who?
Well, why don't you, since you're the moderators, you can call for each side.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. But
So I'm going to flip it and you call with their heads or tails.
Okay, their heads, their tails. Okay.
Okay, so heads go first. The head goes first, right? Tails.
Tails. So they-
Okay,
just-
so this would be Rita and Brenda will then present the first problem solution, and and we don't think necessarily it will take up to 10 minutes, but no longer for sure than 10 minutes. And after they present their problem solution, the other team will then have an opportunity to ask a couple of questions. Now, we've just decided there could be clarification questions, maybe a definition prior to the actual question. You guys have time to talk amongst yourself prior to answering it if you want. Once you answer the question, you have 3 minutes. The one thing we have adopted from Braver Angels is, instead of directly asking the other team the question, you will then ask the moderator the question. I will then pose it to that team. If you guys are asking this team, if you gals are asking that team, you would pose it to Chuck. Does that make sense? And so then we are hoping, after this goes through 4 rounds, because each team gets to ask or present 2 problems around the election, around elections. And then at the very end, we are hoping that we might have time for the audience maybe to ask questions. And the same format would be that you would ask the moderators, and then we would pose it to the teams. So we have, these mics are just picking up for recording. They're not magnifying it. So we do suggest that those speaking speak up so our audience can hear. If you can't, you might just have to watch the recording later. Apologize.
Okay, I think I understand the procedure. But, I will, I'll be running the timer for you guys, and if you're coming up, would you like a 2-minute warning with a flash of this? And my plan is to hit the bell when the 10 minutes are up. So,
How about a 2-minute, 30-second?
2 minutes, oh, okay.
And then a 30-second
And then
separate.
a 30-second.
Oh, okay,
Oh.
sure enough.
We can wrap it up.
So, I guess we're ready to go.
Okay, as soon as you start speaking, your 10 minutes start.
Okay. I'm from what I had just presented before the group, investigating or canvassing, going door to door.
Let's start with what the problem is, though.
Our problem is our voter rolls need to be cleaned up. According to the National Voter Registry Act of 1993, we were supposed to clean these nationwide every 4 years. Our Secretary of State has failed to do that, to clean them up, and we're finding it's really, really bad, and we do not have enough clerks to clean this up. And on top of that, with the voter rolls, it interferes in what's adding to registering people on this voter roll. We have ERIC, which is Electronic Registry Information Center, that is registering these. Ideally, they're supposed to remove the duplicates, but that's not happening. We also have the DMV. We have other governmental agencies as well as medical clinics registering people to vote. Students that go to college and get registered, their ballots, their identity remains at the college after they've graduated. Children that are 16 and 17 and get their driver's permit are registered. So, we do have parental concerns. Is that what they want their children to do? I know a lot of adults don't want to register after going door to door. So at this point, people are saying to us at the door, it's a crooked, it's all rigged, and I'm not voting. And what we're finding on this, that they voted on that Secretary of State's registry, even though they said they didn't.
So along with that, our legislature put in a House Bill 2681, which keeps voters on the rolls even though they never vote. So if you've never even voted, you stay on the rolls. And because of that, there's 200 counties in Oregon with more registered voters than eligible citizens also. That's 1/8 were inaccurate or ineligible. Senate Bill 1527 gave authority to only the Secretary of State to oversee all recounts of and to certify election results. That's one person in charge of all of it. There is no backup there. There is no one to make sure that that is correct. Judicial Watch sued our Secretary of State in Oregon to clean up the voter rolls the first part of this year. They have 90 days to do it. It hasn't been done. It's not even close to done. And again, as Rita said, when we've gone out canvassing, we found things like people who were dead received a ballot. I had a friend who received 2 ballots after she moved and made that change. And she did it well in front of this last election. We've seen people who are living in a home that they're either renting or bought that are still receiving ballots for the people who lived there previously. We're finding there are students at OIT who lived in the dorm and have left and been gone for years, and their ballots are still showing up at the dorms. That's a major problem. So basically, we would honestly like to see the mail-in ballots stopped and go back to the old method. I know some people don't like that. I enjoyed it. I actually enjoyed going to vote, getting to see some neighbors I hadn't seen for a while, where you have to show your ID. Because that's the other thing. With mail-in ballots, there is no ID check. And I've heard it said, well, they check your signature. Well, I find that really hard to believe because years ago, and it happened to be an election year, I had shoulder surgery and was in what's called a gunslinger brace. So my arm was up like this with my hand behind a ball here, and I had to try to remove the ball, get it out, and try to sign as best I could. It looked nothing like my signature, but it went through. Now, you can't tell me our signatures are being checked and accurate if I couldn't read my own signature trying to sign at that time. That's another problem. How do we know who is on the ballot is actually who's supposed to be there? If
these voter rolls are not cleaned up and people are not voting, it would be very easy for somebody to get a hold of that voter roll list, as we did, to do the canvassing. Say, ooh, they haven't voted in the last 2 years. Let's get an extra ballot. Let's fill in their name and let's vote the way we want to. There's all kinds of ways to cheat, which I'm finding out more and more, especially after the 2020 election, because it brought it to mind. Things I never would have thought about. Personally, I think the voter rolls should be cleaned not every 4 years, but every 2 years. It needs to be done more often. Pre-registering to vote 23 days prior to election with the county clerk. As Rita said, banning registration from ERIC, the DMV, governmental offices, and medical clinics. Make it go through the county clerk. So he or she can check at that time and make sure everything is corrected and taken care of. If there's an address change or whatever happens. With the DMV, when you get a license, I heard of people this last election that were either Republican or Democrat, and when they went to the DMV, it re-registered them in a different party. That's another problem. Or is unaffiliated. So I'm ashamed to say, I didn't even know this until 2 years ago, that when you're unaffiliated, you don't get to vote in the primary for Senate or president or whatever. You have to wait. That's another issue. Personally, I would like to see, what's the term, where everybody's on there and you open primary. Because there are times, I'm sorry, I'm registered as a Republican, but I look at what do these people stand for, what have they done, and I want to vote for the best person. Not based on whether they're Democrat, Libertarian, or Republican. Let's see. 1 ballot per person to be turned in at their precinct. They need to show up with a picture, voter ID, and proof of citizenship. We're a sanctuary state. I personally don't want someone who came here illegally, who is breaking the law, voting and making changes where I live, when they have not earned that right because they broke our laws to begin with. And I'm all for immigration. I am. So eliminating mail-in ballots except for military who are out of state, those who are ill and cannot make it, or who are out of town, the way it used to be. It was much more secure. People trusted in it more. You had to show your ID. And I think that's what we need. Clean up these voter rolls.
2 minutes.
You want to add to that?
Yes. So according to Oregon Revised Statute of 260.715, it is a Class C felony to provide false information on this registration. So how are we going to round up everybody? It's not going to happen. I've gone to the sheriff to tell him about this, and he didn't seem to think that was a problem. But with that in mind, it's the ethics, it's the morality, it is right and wrong when we have rules to set by and we can't live by them and we want to just put it to rest. We can't put it to rest. Thank you.
Got it?
I think that's it.
Okay. I guess it's my job to interpret any questions. Can we have? Oh, that's right. Time for questions. That's right.
Yeah,
we
you
have a
guys
minute
can chat before you ask your questions. For
It
sure.
gives people a chance to breathe.
Yeah.
These are 2 questions. Can you read that?
Ask them one question and then
They ask you.
So, how does this work? Each person gets 1 question?
That's what we were thinking.
Well, as a team, yeah, there's 2 questions, so you can individually ask one or come up with it together.
I think we're going to have different focuses. So maybe
So, okay.
you ask them the question and then I'll ask them the question.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
It's hard to ask just one.
I'm not trying to cheat and ask a
I know.
2-part question.
Well, that's, I don't think it.
Okay, start when you start.
Okay, just, Okay, so I'm directing this out.
To me, yeah.
Oh, it's
Oh,
you.
sorry, I got it.
Yeah. What I'm not seeing is that the questions about like getting a second ballot or questions about the signature, which I think might have more to do with social security numbers and other more direct, concrete forms of voter identification. It seems to be that the issues brought up, like cleaning up voter rolls, which is a legitimate question to ask, that has less to do with something nefarious and more to do with procedural mishaps. Like when I was in college, I was able to vote. Like if I moved out, I might still get a ballot, but my address itself might have changed. That might have happened, but I can only vote once. So I guess my question is, to what degree do we know that some of this is leading to actual changes in the voting outcome or actual nefarious practices? And what counts as evidence in essence? I hope that
Okay.
makes sense.
Yeah, so if you guys can clarify the whole, what information is found and how can you determine if it's various or just needs to be cleaned up?
Yeah.
2 minutes, 3 minutes, excuse me.
Arizona, there are 3. According to what we're finding, Joe Van Pulitzer, which is an expert witness of the Arizona audits, he said there's 345,000 violations of the 14th Amendment with our ballots. So hopefully that'll help you to see that. They said that there was, just in Klamath County, we had over 500 people, their ballots were not accepted. If we had precinct voting, everybody's ballot would count. And they said that it was really interesting how people over 70 was 8.63% of that forensic audit were people over 70 years old that voted. And they said there was a new influx of people coming and going of 8.63%.
So without doing a forensic audit, we won't really know.
So basically, I think Jonathan's question had to do with, which way this is, if it's biased, how do you know which way? But what I'm hearing is that it's just errors. We don't know if there's any particular bias. I mean, is that right?
No, there's, I mean, to have 345,000 violations of the 14th Amendment, those are charges in the state of Oregon.
No, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to
Is that allowed
trying
to
to do
clarify?
If we're going by this, there's 2 questions per team, but
okay.
I'm
But
open
if
to
you-
change
Well,
if you
I,
want to.
Can we change
I want to
because
stick
it
to
helps to
whatever
have
we
the
agree.
dialogue back and forth.
I'm cool with it.
Can I make this just my clarifying question?
Sure.
The 14th Amendment, which part of the 14th Amendment are you referring to?
I couldn't
Free,
hear that, I'm sorry.
Could you please express what part of the 14th Amendment this is violating?
yes, it's their right to vote, free and fair elections. And when somebody votes for them, they said there was 14% people had went in to sign, fill out their ballots in Arizona, and they had already voted. And so they were given a little promissory note to vote.
Original ballot.
Right. And that's what happened there. So now that we're seeing that, and it's across the nation, we've got Wisconsin that with the assembly bill overwhelmingly voted to decertify the electoral votes of the 2020 election. We've got Texas that has done the very same thing. There's a couple other states that are in the process. Oregon has 3 counties that are already bringing that forward.
Okay,
I'm
thank
not sure where my timer was set for, but there.
3 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, second question.
Well, my question would start with a statement. Whenever you have more than 150 million people voting, you always have anomalies. And these are anecdotal things that happen everywhere. It's not just people complaining about someone voting that shouldn't have, but it's actual cases that they can actually follow up on, and 90% of them are accidents, are cases like the one in Oregon where the man signed, had his wife sign because he was going hunting for that week and he didn't want to have to be bothered. So he had his wife fill out his, and he can't do that, of course. And they called him, and he was, I've sat in the outer office at the Elections Bureau and watched a lot of people come in and resign, because one guy came in, they said, your signature doesn't look anything like, by the way, they're trained by the FBI. They have an extensive training on how to compare signatures. And when you get older, your signature gets sloppier. So a lot of older people are asked to come in and resign. But he broke his right arm, and so he signed with his left hand. And, you know, of course his signature didn't match. But, and things fall through the cracks, but those are, when you look at all of the people who have voted in Oregon in the last 19 years, they've come up with a couple of hundred they challenged. They thought there was criminal intent or whatever, and I think 6 people have been actually charged and found to have committed a felony. And they said the episodes of voter fraud, or the evidence of voter fraud in Oregon with our mail-in, we've been doing mail-in balloting since 1998, the instances of fraud are about 0.000, and I went to the percent, so I mean it's way less than 1%.
Do you have the
But
question, please?
my question? Okay, yeah, well, my question, I was prefacing it with, I was trying to hit all the different subjects. This wasn't just one. Yeah, so what evidence do you have of people being convicted of fraud in Oregon in the last 20 years since we went to?
So if you guys have some evidence of the fraud, please.
Yes, I have at least a printout of 18 people from 2019 to 2003 that have been reported. And those incidents, some of them, like you just mentioned, were on there. But there was one in Klamath County that was adjudicating the ballot, and there were empty bubbles, and she was filling them in.
Yes, I know. I was there when that happened.
Okay, so now that part we'll bring out for you as well. That's how it happened. There are when we canvassed.
And she got 90 days in jail.
These,
Should have been more.
yeah, we're going to ask. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah.
So
You'll get to ask.
okay.
Okay.
But do you
we're
have
out of
instances in
time.
Oregon? Did they answer the question?
The 18 or the
Yeah, I do have a
So 18
printout.
out of how many people that voted since 20?
Yeah, we've got, what,
18.
4 million in the state of Oregon, supposedly?
Do you know what percentage point that is?
It's probably a 0.44%. But, you know, it does happen.
May I
Oh, yeah, it
interrupt?
happens.
Let me try to, what I've heard is that there's a lot of error going on, and the question I thought was, how do I turn off my phone from beeping? And the response seems to be, it didn't address that exactly, but is there evidence that it is biased, was what I thought I heard. And it just, I think it raised a legitimate point. There's a lot of error, and it seems like there's some agreement that the amount that's actually been determined to be fraud is relatively small. But I agree that we have some error going on, and maybe make it better. I mean, is that a fair summary?
Yeah,
Jonathan? Yeah,
I agree with that.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay,
Got more agreements here. Thank you. I guess
make it
I
better.
helped there.
Yeah.
Are we already on to,
So the second problem solution will be presented on this side, and
Can I go first? Go ahead. Because this addresses part of the Clackamas County thing. So I want to start out by saying my name is Faith, and my faith is very important to me. That's why we're meeting in a church. I grew up attending church 3 times a week and have read the Bible cover to cover and the New Testament at least 3 times. My main motivation for looking into Braver Angels is to find a way to reconnect with my evangelical brother in the Midwest. Once we were very close, now we are not. And I want to thank you guys for participating in this, because this is being willing to stand up and especially have it recorded and talk to people, supposed enemies or the people on the other side. Anyway, is finding common ground is very important, and I'm really happy about that. The issue for today is election integrity, and I have volunteered for many activities associated with the election process for decades. I must admit, I was running for Jonathan's seat when it was House District 56 2 years ago, so I'll admit that. I have legally harvested ballots from a nursing home, registered voters at bus stops and malls, attended conventions to determine the wording of ballot measures, knocked on doors countless times about propositions and candidates, and worked as a poll watcher several times. As a poll watcher, I actually witnessed voter fraud. Poll watchers are the cop on the block, so to speak. We understand that the poll workers themselves have to be Democrats, Republicans, and sometimes independents at every table, depending on the registration in your county. This incident occurred in Klamath County in 2015. It was observed that one lady in the room was filling in down ballot where the person had only voted for president. This is real voter fraud. She was quickly stopped, later convicted, and she received a 90-day jail sentence. She could have received a $5,000 fine and been removed from the voter rolls permanently. But what they said is she can no longer be a poll worker or watcher. And so she got a light sentence, actually. The county clerk immediately, when this happened, after she filled out about 3 ballots that way and it was discovered, the county clerk immediately removed all black and blue pens from the room for the workers' notepads, because they take notes on the side when they're opening ballots and stuff. And only red pens were allowed from that point on, and the problem was solved in less than an hour. It doesn't matter who commits it, voter fraud is already illegal and not tolerated. True to her duty, the clerk, and since I have 10 minutes, I'll tell you who the clerk was. It was Sherry Hall. She was in Klamath County. She is the one, she made national headlines because when the gay marriage thing went through, she refused to sign the licenses for gay couples. And that's who she was, okay? And so the state bent over backwards to accommodate her. She either had to quit or sign all marriage certificates. So they let her make a stamp of her signature. So her stamp is put on marriage licenses, both gay and straight. And that's how they solved that problem. But she was very conservative, and I was very proud of how she responded to the voter fraud. She jumped on it immediately and changed it. Like I said, they had red pens within the hour because I was one of the observers. And she bends over backwards to make sure that the votes are counted fairly and accurately. From my perspective, regardless of party, the vast majority of county clerks and poll workers are 100% committed to free and fair elections. Okay, so, and then I was a poll watcher at this last thing, but since we have 10 minutes and not 3, I trimmed this down to 2.5 minutes. So I can tell you that I used to say, dead people do vote. They have these things where they say dead people are voting, immigrants are voting. Sometimes immigrants will fill out a voter registration, but that does not mean that they vote because they don't want to be uncovered. So they're not going to take a chance of voting. And the instances, I couldn't find any instances of it happening. But anyway, so I told someone that was knowledgeable, and they came back to me with, actually dead people can vote in Oregon now, as of a couple of years ago. Used to, if you mailed your ballot on after you received it, so you mailed it in a week early, and they received it 3 days later, and then you died, they would compare it to the death rolls, and they would remove that ballot, and it may not be removed for a week or something, but they would say, oh, this person died on voting day. They changed that legislation so that now, if you legitimately vote 2 weeks early, and a week later, they receive your ballot and stuff, and they find out later that you died, doesn't matter. If you were alive on the day that you mailed it in, your vote counts. So now dead people actually are voting in Oregon. So, which is weird, but it's true. This is the facts, okay? So anyway, as a poll watcher, I've observed the same level of integrity here in Klamath County. If you have doubts or if you've heard otherwise, I've spoken to the county clerk, and we are invited as a group to tour the election division and ask any questions we may have. If you have suggestions about how to make the process better, the county clerk and her staff have told me that they're open to your ideas. I assume we may not agree on past elections, but what's happening in other states and other counties in Oregon are beyond our control. So what I want to do is focus on common ground here in Klamath County, and the question is, how can we make sure that elections are free and fair and people feel comfortable about them? And when I was driving here, I thought, besides this tour, I thought of another, drop boxes. People say they have problems with drop boxes and stuff. Okay, in Oregon now, as of the last couple of years, you don't even have to put a stamp on the envelope. You can drop it at the post office. You can drop it, it goes out with your mail. And it is treated, they went back and tweaked it to say it's not treated as franked mail, it's treated as real first-class mail. So the ballots go through first at the post office, like first-class mail does. But you don't have to put a stamp on it. So to me, every mailbox is a drop box. Why do we have drop boxes? Do we still have them? If the elections people have to go out and collect the ballots and bring them back, and let the postman do it. So that's one of my questions when I go on a tour of the county. I want to ask, do we still have drop boxes? Why? Your mailbox is your drop box, because you don't even have to put a stamp on it. And the drop boxes used to save people the cost of a stamp. And so in Oregon, I think I couldn't find any, like I said, I found instances, okay, you never say never and never say always. But I went to the Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative foundation, and they looked at all the voting anomalies in all the different states, and they never came up with any number that even approached 1% of problems. And like the last election, 2020 election, over 150 million people voted. You're always going to have anomalies. But how many of those complaints actually ended up in court trials, actually ended up in convictions? You'll find that, our voting system is a lot cleaner than people. You can always find a guy out here who did something, or some anecdotal stuff about stuff. I've knocked on doors too and talked to people and stuff. And ballots are not supposed to be forwarded, but sometimes I guess they have been, if people have been forwarded. They're not supposed to be forwarded, so it's supposed to be you at that address. And people move. We are much more transitory than we ever have been before. So ballots go out to old addresses all the time. Doesn't mean the person voted, doesn't mean the person voted twice. I was registered in 2 states, as was Tiffany, President Trump's daughter. She was registered in New York and Florida when she moved to Florida. I was registered in California and Oregon when I moved up here. But you don't go in, and if you don't vote in the election, you can only vote once legally. And you don't usually go in, part of your moving thing isn't to go to the elections division and say, I'm going to move to Florida so you can take me off your rolls. That's not on your list of changing your address and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, a lot of people are registered, especially students, in 2 states, but they can't vote twice. If they do that, turn them in, and they should go to jail for that. So
30 seconds.
So my solution is we take a tour as a group of the county elections and ask any question you want. My question is going to be about drop boxes.
Thank you.
Was there a specific problem solution worded? I
But,
didn't hear.
excuse me, we're asking that the audience not participate at this point. Sorry.
The problem is people don't trust elections.
Got 3 minutes now, right? Not even an hour. guys ready?
So may I ask the
Yeah,
question?
yeah,
then?
yeah.
Okay.
Oh.
So it is my understanding that the mail-in ballot is preferred at this point? Is that correct? And that my question is, how many times does the chain of custody of your ballot go once you release it into a post office box?
So the question is, as I understand it, do you support mail-in ballots, and what is the chain that ballot goes through and security in that process?
That's why I think that with eliminating drop boxes, the chain will be smaller. You know, the chain of custody, well, it'll be from the post office. If you don't trust the post office, then you're not gonna trust it. But, you know, it goes from, right now, nobody's turned in anything. People say things have happened, but they don't turn in any examples. Or they don't say, you know, this person voted twice, I know he did. Well, what's your, you know, let's go investigate that if you have any evidence of it. Well, he bragged to me that he did. Well, let's go interview that guy. You know, yes, I think mail-in balloting makes it easier for the voter. More people tend to vote. They haven't found any problems with it. And to me, free and fair elections is paramount in a democracy. If you want to keep your republic, you gotta let everybody vote. Everybody, every qualified voter should be able to vote. And I mean, there were so many things about 16 and 17-year-olds registering to vote. You don't get a ballot until you're 18. Kids do register in high school, but you don't get a ballot until you turn 18. So.
Okay.
I have one more question, I suppose.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so, can I just make a comment first and then about the mail-in, if you take it to the post office and how many times it changes hands? You take it to the post office, it goes to our post office, then it gets sent over to Medford, and then it gets sent back. How many chains of custody within the post office itself, how many things could happen to that ballot in between? That to me is an issue. But what I really, and the no anomalies, I really have to question that. And I hate to go back to 2020 again, but I was watching CNN the night of the election. Now, this was nationwide, not just Oregon, but looking at the presidential election. And you watch and you see over here are the numbers of votes for Biden, number of votes for Trump, and the anchor person over here. Then all of a sudden they just show the anchor person. I was watching those numbers. And then they come back and then they show you a picture of the board of those numbers. The numbers for Trump went down and the numbers for Biden went up. Now, if these were accurate accounts and not anomalies, nobody's count would go down. That is an issue. And how do we know that that is not happening in Oregon? We need to have a forensic audit, period.
So what's the question?
So the question is, with everything you said, the mail-in ballots, how do you know it's safe and secure? How can you prove it's safe and secure? And how can you prove with that no anomalies? Or very,
My answer would be, how many convictions have there been? How many people have actually been turned in, ballots have been turned in as fraud? And how many convictions there have been? So few convictions. If it's real, that's why in the election, that's why in the last election, over 60 courts kicked out all the challenges against the election because, and some of these judges were Trump's appointed judges, but they kicked them out because there was no evidence. So, if there's evidence, bring it to the courts. I agree with, I think our court system, I don't challenge, there's problems with the court system sometimes, but when more than 60 courts all across the country have said, and the Supreme Court refused to look at it, and they're mostly conservative, but they refused to look at it because there was no evidence of fraud.
Can I interrupt? We're going off into the 2020
Right.
issue, and that I heard, you know, what CNN posted, and who knows if that's what the actual, maybe it was a mistake that happened there. Jonathan, I think you had a comment to make, maybe it would help.
Am I allowed to add to your
Well,
response?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would just note, I mean, asking these questions are necessary and important, but we do have to have some standard of evidence that we can say, okay, we can ask, are there anomalies happening or errors? We have to be able to say, this is what evidence is, and I accept that along the way some of these questions are answered. For in this primary election, I voted, sent it in, but I got a letter back saying there was something wrong with the ballot, so I have to vote again. And I believe the Secretary of State does post or puts out a letter saying, like, this is how the vote went, these were any irregularities, this is what we accounted for, and our people look through it and all that. I think there is a process of verification. And I think it's important to set for ourselves, like, what does evidence mean and when are we going to accept that?
Can I just make one comment real quick about the whole Supreme Court thing? They didn't turn it down because there wasn't sufficient evidence. They never said that. They did not want to do it because they didn't want it to get political about what they do.
They didn't,
That's
and they didn't
why.
have standing, yeah, because these are state issues, states
Yeah.
decide, yeah.
As
know.
I understood,
know.
Texas was grieving what Pennsylvania did or something. So-
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
May I address the clerk interview, going down to the clerk's office?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a group of us did do that. A couple of them that were running for office were there. And the summary of what they did find is that the cameras, security cameras, were only pointed in one direction. It was only one. And they said that's not really secure. They said that the live streaming was only turned on when somebody was watching. So if you turned on at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're getting a rerun.
They weren't there, that's why.
So they shut the cameras off.
Yeah.
It said, are other counties in Oregon turning off their live streams too? What happens when election observers are not there and the camera is turned off? The public shouldn't be left to wonder or guess. Todd Gassell. That's what he made his comments about. We did see a live adjudication, and at the top of the screen it said Google search, even though we're told that it has no internet connection. So what happens to our ballots, number one, it's checked in to the Secretary of State by your secretary, by whoever's scanning your signature. They also have things called auto signers. There's a report on a man that was crossing his truck across state borders full of ballots that were auto signers.
Is he in jail?
He was just delivering the mail.
That was a,
Yeah, he was just delivering the
I think
mail.
that was a rumor that never went anywhere. But can I just address this live streaming thing?
Yeah.
Because they do turn it off when and when you see that little Google thing, that's when they're live streaming, because they're going on Google and letting the world see what they see. You can tune in, and they did this last time, they bent over backwards to have at least one camera. I can tell you now, I've heard that more cameras have been put into the room so that you can see each station, but 4 people tuned in.
We're 11 o'clock, and I suggest,
They're not there at 3
I
o'clock in the morning.
think there's a lot of shared concern here, and I think this could be addressed at follow-up with our county elections office, and I think we
Let's ask
may
some
have enough
questions.
interest for that to happen in a bipartisan or whatever way, and I apologize, because I'm pretty horrible at keeping time here, but, yes, so
We need to
where
move on.
where
So
are
we're
we now,
now,
Kristen?
we've presented, 2 problems have been presented, problem solutions, so now we go back to problem number 3, and you have 10 minutes. I'll give you 8 minutes to let you know you have 2 left.
Yeah, and if you guys ask a question and they understand it, I'm fine with letting them go with this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
appreciate it. So basically, insecure voting. House Bill 3291 allows ballots to come in 7 days after the election still to count. So to me, that allows time, if somebody wants to cheat, to stuff the ballots, to make the election come out the way they want, instead of everybody turn it in at the same time. Ballot harvesting is legal in Oregon. You yourself said you did it. So how do we know when somebody is harvesting those ballots, they're not going, especially to an old folks' home, and voting for them? There is no proof that they are not doing that. I'm also a little disturbed. I just talked to a neighbor and friend of mine just last week, and she said she had a gal coming over to her home to help her with her horses, 30 years old, was told in school by her teacher, you need to register Democrat and vote Democrat because Republicans are monsters. That should not be happening in our schools. But so then people are being pushed one way. The counting machines are connected to the internet, potentially allowing hacking. If there is any Google on the machines, they can easily be hacked. The software is not getting updated. Are you aware that Oregon's 2020 election director was fired for disclosing security concerns? There are insufficient poll watchers. In this last election, I talked to someone who said there just weren't enough, and the poll watchers were only allowed to stay there for 1, potentially 2 hours. So if we don't have enough poll watchers to really be watching this, how do we know it's a safe and secure election? Drop boxes are not monitored. They're left unattended. Some don't have video cameras, and then the videos are not even looked at. So this is a huge problem. Do you want to add anything? Sure.
According, our Constitution says free and fair election has nothing to do with our convenience. Second thing is our security on how the clerks are to conduct their elections. They can use a security camera, but they prefer the lock. And how easy are locks picked and hacked? Third is, I've been to several of the drop boxes here in town. One is the community college, and I asked the police officer, is there a camera on this? And he says, yes, 30 days. And I asked him, do you review the tape? And he says, no, I don't have time. I went to OIT, and I talked to Officer Tomlinson, and he said to me, well, we had it budgeted to have cameras, but it never made it through. The box that sits on a shelf at OIT is put out on the counter at 6 in the morning and taken back in at 4:30. According to the regulations for clerks, it has to be 8 p.m. on election day, and it was taken in at 4:30 and never returned. And at least it's supposed to have somebody watching it. But the one in Crescent doesn't have a camera on it. It's way out in the boonies, and there's no security on it at all. So is that safe and secure? Our mailboxes, they'd say that 7 days after, with the postage stamp on it, if you use the P.O. box, they don't have the little time stamp that goes on an envelope when it passes through their separation container. They've all been routed out to other counties. So there's 26 counties that do not have that timestamp on the envelopes. So how can we do it? According to the Secretary of State, it says count the ballot anyways, regardless when it comes in.
So some solutions. And again, I know you probably don't want to hear this, but we need to eliminate the machines and go back to counting by hand in the precinct. It really does not take that long. Stiffer prison sentences for any election tampering. How about we come up with 1 day voting with time off from work or a voting day holiday? So there's no excuse that I can't go because I'll lose my job. Ballots received after voting day should be discarded and not counted. We have plenty of time. We know when the voting is due to get it in on time. We don't need to add 7 days to it. The only exception to that might be a military person voting from overseas and sending their ballot in. Banning registration from ERIC, the DMV, government offices, and medical clinics. So there's one place that does the registration who can check that against the current voter rolls and make sure somebody, if they have a change of address, and that gets cleaned up. And we need to get more poll watchers. Plain and simple.
There's no room if you've been there.
I haven't been there.
Yeah.
But the other thing too is if we stay with the paper ballots and the drop boxes, then every single one should have a camera on it 24/7, and that should be reviewed. When it comes, I was shocked when I didn't realize we have ballot harvesting is legal here in Oregon, because I talked to a friend in Grants Pass and she watched somebody stuff a bunch of ballots in. If you're gonna take a ballot in, I think that should be limited to just you and your family member. So like, say my husband's at work and busy, I take his in and drop his in with mine, but no more than that.
Just for evidence, this is Rachel Rodriguez out of Texas, and she was caught ballot trafficking. It's no longer harvesting, it's trafficking. It's a bigger, I don't know what you want to call it, a bigger racket,
I hope she's in jail too.
and she is.
Yes,
And then there's
for a long time.
Janet Reed out of Illinois. She's in prison for ballot trafficking. And this is not a democratic philosophy, but according to the 1854, Congress set a one-day voting period. We have gotten way of what our founding fathers had intended for our elections. And
Also have airplanes. Sorry.
2 minutes, something else?
I think we've heard a lot of concerns about irregularities and opportunities for things to go wrong. And, but we have set procedures in the state. I guess I think we'd be looking at considering a bunch of recommendations that would standardize or whatever the process. And I think that would take a pretty lengthy conversation and a worthy one outside of this arena.
Can I do a clarification?
Yeah, you can.
Since I ballot harvested and I admit it, we didn't call it that then, but when you pick up other ballots, like at a retirement home or something, you sign a thing under penalty of 5 years in prison and $10,000 fine saying, I'm going to pick up these ballots. They're already filled out. You don't help people fill them out. You pick up the envelopes and take them. This was back when you had to put stamps on them and stuff, but this was about 8 years ago. And you sign a thing saying, I will deliver their ballots to the elections office. And you sign it and date it. And then the people that you pick it up from, they sign it. Faith picked up my ballot, and they sign it and date it. And then I take those ballots and I went immediately to the elections and dropped them off. I thought I'd get a whole bunch of them because this was a retirement home. I ended up getting 3, but whatever. And I don't know if they voted Democrat or Republican. But nowadays, that would be called ballot harvesting. And it's just picking up. When I dropped off our mailboxes at the end of my street and stuff, I took my next door neighbor's ballot and my husband's ballot and I dropped them in the box. If that's harvesting, I mean, that's dropping off more than one ballot at a time. And people do it all the time. They'll do it for everyone in their household. Anyway, I just wanted to say that harvesting, I had to sign a thing under penalty of going to jail and being
Can I
fined.
just address that to you?
Sure.
The only people who are worried about the penalty of law are those who will follow the law. And it's not you that I'm worried about. It's those that don't.
Yeah, I think we're having here a civil conversation about how to address this broad issue about many procedures and I think many laws and so forth to consider. Yeah, and for the sake of trying to keep on our timeline and saving some time at the end for what to do about it,
Can I ask a question?
Yes,
Sure,
yeah,
yeah,
two questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So, well, I had two questions. I feel that, I think there were some contradictory arguments that were made. They'll all focus in on one question, which is, you had said before that it's not about convenience, but that we should also have free and fair elections. But how can we have free and fair elections when fairness means access for a lot of people? So fairness can be, we need to work with people where they are, be it disabled in their homes, they just don't have time to go stand in line on voting day. How can we say that convenience doesn't matter if we also say that we want free and fair elections?
Good question.
I think that's why we said one day voting with time off from work or a voting holiday. Okay, so, and again, we said, okay, you can keep the mail-in ballots for those who are infirmed or absent due to military service, but otherwise, most people live close to where their precinct is, and what does it take to get there? And if they need help to get there, then they need to call on their neighbors and friends to get them there to vote. So it's fair for all.
Can I ask, because if we're saying that mail-in ballots are like leading to nefarious actions, how can we then say, well, mail-in ballots are okay, or ballot harvesting is okay when it's my partner, my family, what have you, or for soldiers? Isn't that contradicting the whole premise of the concern, which was that there's something nefarious going on?
So, yeah, because I think maybe you guys presented, when you guys shared, talking about, well, you can allow this, maybe under the current situation, but you are encouraging to move to a one-day take off work kind of as well. So maybe you would clarify that.
I think we would really like to see an end of the mail-in ballots completely. There's too many loopholes, too many ways, and it's sometimes hard for those of us who are honest to wrap our heads around what dishonest people will do. I mean, I used to do jail ministry, and I was shocked at the things they would think of, because it never would have crossed my mind. And it makes it too easy. And the reason we don't have people who are caught is because who's looking for it? If our own sheriff won't follow up on things, that's a sad state.
Can I ask a clarification? If you vote on one day, what if there's a snowstorm?
That's a good question.
Yeah, and there's occurred to me, I'm pitching in here when I should not, but there are cases of people waiting for hours and hours to vote, and I think we would all agree that's not a good scene. And that gets to convenience in a way too, which I think is Jonathan's, and I'm begging that we try to move on.
Can I address that real quick?
Okay.
Because when we used to do it, there was just a couple of hours for everyone to get to their precinct to vote. But if it's an all-day thing, if you have all day to make it to your precinct to vote, it shouldn't be a problem.
If there's an 8-hour wait to get at the front of the line, there's a problem, in my view.
Wouldn't be
Yeah.
a problem.
I don't think they're gonna see that.
Well, not in Klamath County, you're right, you're
Yeah,
right.
one reason they went to mail-in balloting was inclement weather.
Okay.
Because you can have a snowstorm or an ice storm any day of the year in Bend, and probably here.
Here.
So, you know.
July.
Do you guys have one more question for
That would be easy to solve, is if there is a snowstorm, maybe make it a second day if you need to.
Oh
if
boy,
that-
you have to go through the legislature, that's a big
Can
deal.
I just, we've also had ice cream cones and firecrackers in our mailboxes and drop boxes. Precinct
Really?
is the only way to do it. Go to the precinct, grab mom and dad or whatever, take them down.
Who did that? Well, anyway.
Kristen, help me
Okay.
move on to the next one,
Time
will
for
you?
the last
Okay,
question.
so, do you guys have one more question?
Issue
Okay.
or
Yeah.
Yes, so,
solution?
Okay.
We need to move along.
yes.
All right.
Wait, can I say one more thing real
Yeah.
quick? If you can make it to the post office, you can make it to a precinct to vote in person.
Okay, Jonathan.
All right. So I wanted to look at this in a different way and say that election integrity, which we're concerned with, has more to do with strengthening our democracy. And what I've seen and what the evidence seems to show is that the issue tends to be with a sense of estrangement, a sense of lacking access either to information, time, or kind of the social networks to make democracy actually work. So in a sense, I'm going to argue that voting and elections by themselves are sometimes superficial answers to deeper questions. And so when I think about ballots themselves or the voting process, if you go back to, Reconstruction era, there was literally what you were talking about, like people literally going and filling out or stuffing boxes for people. In the South, there was the rampant problem of the KKK intimidating newly
Franchised.
newly franchised black voters. That probably swayed the 1968 election. If you go to the Gilded Age, that's where you start to see changes in ballots, where it used to be, for many people who weren't literate, they could look at a ballot and just vote by color, like green and yellow for whatever party it was. That's changed. So in the 1970s, that changed. We have more power of the parties. In the 2000 election, that was an incredibly contentious election in Florida. And what we see there is where ballots don't have some uniformity, where there's some centralized manner of voting, we get those irregularities. Though in essence, apart from these cases, in the modern era, we just don't see the type of corruption or nefarious acts that are being claimed. And what we see is that with mail-in ballots, that simplifies a lot of access for a lot of voters who wouldn't otherwise be able to participate in this way. It could be soldiers, but it also could be someone in a nursing home. It could be someone working all day for a minimum wage job. There are issues with ballot box access. We see this in rural areas all over the United States, and particularly with tribes, that in tribal regions, they lack access to a lot of ballot boxes. I live downtown and could walk right across the street and turn in my ballot. So there are questions of access to voting, but less questions of whether or not the voting process is corrupted. And so what I would rather say is that a lot of what we face here is something deeper in terms of our social networks. And I think in rural areas in particular, which is what I've been focusing a lot on recently, this campaign, is that we tend to be kind of isolated in terms of resources. We live in what's called a news desert. So we tend to get a very one end of the spectrum radio type of programming, usually one station. We have one local newspaper, which tries with valiant effort, but is incredibly underfunded and understaffed. And we tend to, unfortunately, rely on a lot on getting information and our social human connections through social media. And social media tends to present itself as legitimate, when it in no way has to go through a peer review process. I know I'm a candidate. I can post whatever I want on social media, and there is no accountability for that. That's different than like a sign or brochure or something like that. There's some peer review process that has to go through. And I think in rural areas, what tends to happen is we don't have that accountability. But what we do have are centers of power that get to determine what the political issues are and get to determine who runs for office. And that is the issue, I think, that leads to concerns over election integrity. We have to make power less vertical, more horizontal. And I think the way to do that is to get more people involved in the process. What Faith said about going to, observing the ballot count process, that's one way to do it.
And I want high school classes to do that too.
Another thing I said was allow student work opportunities for candidates for city hall, for city councils, for local positions of power. That could be work study programs, that could count for credits, it could be late high school and college level. We can have a social media campaign, which I know some of our city council members have already agreed to do, like talk about, this is what I do as county clerk, this is my job, this is my responsibility, this is why it affects you. that's a way to reach more people. But if we, I'm sorry, I'll finish this. We do need to make it easier to vote, not much harder. I do agree with the idea of like a voting holiday, make a specific day where we kind of have it in our consciousness that this is the day we vote. We also need to demand a bit more from our elected representatives, more than touting conspiracy theories. Robert Putnam, in his book Bowling Alone, talks about how since the 1970s we're kind of socially estranged. And there's certain power centers, especially in rural areas, be it the professional class, the church class, the city council class, the property class. There tends to be a revolving door where everybody knows each other. And if you want access into the political game, you gotta know somebody. So I might feel less estranged because I have a union, I have a decent income as a teacher. I'm also kind of a stereotypical story of a professional that was outsourced from an urban area to work in a rural area. And that's where you see some political divides. But because of my access, I feel less estranged. I feel like the system's working for me. But if you're a wage worker that doesn't have time to vote, not only does voting seem meaningless, I don't have recourse to deal with other issues I have, be it childcare, poverty, or what have you. I think then to make voting more meaningful, to make the political process more legitimate, is to have more horizontal power. That means dealing with issues of income inequality, dealing with issues of ballot access, dealing with issues of revitalizing union power, and building these social networks where there's greater diversity of educational background, and actually giving them power. So we're not bowling alone or voting alone, to paraphrase what Putnam said. The good news is, where's my time?
You have 3 minutes.
The good news is we do have high voter turnout for our small little area. In 2000, these are rough numbers, so pardon my sources. In 2020, about 78% of Klamath County was over the age of 18. That means 78% can vote. We had about 75% vote in 2020. That's good. That means we do have higher than average for our small community voter participation. That being said, in primary elections, it's quite low. My age demographic, 18 to 30, I'm 32. That's pretty awful. That's kind of the historical trend. So there are ways to bring it out a bit more. And I think also, I'll leave it with that, but I think that there are opportunities to build that, but we need to have more options for social and political networking. Something beyond in rural areas, and I'm being somewhat critical to my friends here in the faith community, it tends to be churches that have a lot of power, be it liberal or conservative. It tends to be the mentor groups. That tends to be made up of the professional class that I'm a part of. It tends to be these professional influencers, be it people we know, city councilor, chief of police, all these groups that tend to be revolving. Those are all important groups, but power needs to be less vertical, more horizontal. So we should see more direct involvement of unions, tribes, the poor and working class. Why not have a homeless people's assembly? Why don't we make it so we can ensure their vote? The vote itself there is pretty minimal in terms of direct impact. But having these political conversations, working with groups like Braver Angels, that's a way to make the election process more meaningful. Because I think coming out of these types of conversations, we can recognize that the vote is a small, small piece of the larger democratic process. So those are my solutions. I think a social media campaign, going and visiting and being a part of the process is a way to do it. Get young people involved through work opportunities. Work with groups like Braver Angels, have more meetings between the Democrats and the Republicans. We should be demanding that our local representatives, who are going to be conservative now and will probably be conservative after this election, have regular debates and forums, town halls.
Town halls.
The last time we had a town hall was years ago. That shows that there's kind of one that's taking for granted the voter, and it leads to this kind of greater sense of isolation.
30 seconds.
And I'll end with that. Thank you.
He's a teacher, can you
Could
tell?
I just throw in, would this be considered a example of horizontal power here today in social networking?
I would
so.
think so.
Okay, yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.
I would suspect.
Yeah, I think we're doing the right thing, actually, here, so
We're
that's
answering his
my
question.
pitch. Thank you.
Yes, so if you guys have,
I think I need a little more clarification on that horizontal power. I mean, I know you just said a lot of things.
Yeah.
But what is that to you?
So horizontal power, if, where vertical power tends to be influence, voice, access for, the property class, the teacher class like myself. If I say I'm a teacher, that automatically snaps on, oh, I should respect this person, listen to what they have to say. I probably have a steady income, probably have a master's degree. If I'm a working class individual, I may not have a union. If I have a union, I have more voice, I have more democracy in my life. If I'm already part of kind of the city council network, and we live up in the hills all with each other, that's a form of vertical power. Because politics isn't simply the voting process, it's the larger context of that vote. So I think we need to talk about how do we reach demographics that don't live in the suburbs here in Klamath Falls? How do we reach demographics that aren't those that always go to city council meetings? How do we reach beyond mentorship programs and other leadership communities to build networks of influence within, homeless community, the immigrant community, working class laborers, those just who don't have the time for this type of thing.
So can I clarify your clarification? That vertical, as opposed to horizontal.
Vertical is very
equal-
concentrated power, whereas horizontal is more democratic. to
Yeah,
members.
okay. So you're saying instead of like just the mayor making a decision or just the head of the company, that the people have input on that decision
Yeah.
process?
So when you talk about,
Okay.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I was confused about horizontal.
If you have stakeholders trying to make a decision, it shouldn't only be the select kind of elite in a community. That's vertical power versus horizontal.
and so you're suggesting that we get more of the information out to all of these vertical groups to know about coming to vote, right, and getting involved, is that?
I think we need to focus on a lot of other things before the vote to make
before
the
the-
democracy far more enlivened and enriched.
Like
And
town
then the
halls.
vote, town halls,
Like
that's the
town
way to
halls.
get, but we need to work intentionally to make it accessible to, yeah.
Up to it. Under discussion.
I'm not saying that's easy, I'm just
Okay.
saying that's what we have to do.
Kristen and I believe, have agreed that we, one more question, and then we'd like to open it up for, I think Kristen and I could make a brief statement about what we'd like to see happen at the end of this meeting. Is that appropriate?
Sure.
Okay?
Could you have one more question for him?
I'm just thinking more cohesively, when we separate all of the separations and the unions, and it almost gets us where we're pinging each other. And if we make an effort, instead of putting people, the homeless and the master's degrees, and when we do that, ideally, we become more of a unified body if we all come together, rather than just meeting each one of those needs, which can be done in a private way. But there has to be a point where we can all meet together.
Any question for the team?
I think that's what Jonathan was saying. Do I have that right?
Is your question?
She wants to drop the labeling, maybe.
Well,
Yeah.
I use that not to label, but to describe. I think
Okay.
if we ignore the context of my vote, for example, my background, my biases, the fact that I have time to research things, I can't say that for everybody. I think if we ignore the context of individuals, it's much harder to talk about those larger democratic solutions.
To understand where they're coming from?
To understand where they're coming from, and yeah, so I also agree, labels can kind of make people into almost like commodities,
Yeah.
and that's not really fair to the individual. But I think if we ignore that person's situation,
Yeah.
for good or ill, I think it detracts from the conversation, because we can just flippantly say, well, you're an individual, work hard. That's a little bit easier for me to say, I think, in certain contexts, or just find time to get off of work. That might be easier for me to say.
All right, I'm going to jump in here and offer my comment, which is I'm very gratified with what I've seen here. This is, I think, totally compatible with Braver Angels' mission to facilitate communication and understanding. And I want to applaud the audience too for having patiently sat by. And what would you like to see done in the last half hour?
Oh, well, I just also want to say I'm very grateful for those who've participated. Thank you. And I think, like it's been mentioned, is that we continue these discussions and we are working together, ideally, in coming up with solutions. So I hope this is just the start. I know that even Rita has brought to my attention, when I told her about this, that there are other counties in Oregon that are trying to do similar things and have wanted to come to this, but we were like, let's keep it small, but having bigger ones where we can share our ideas outside of the community to other communities as well. So
yeah, and I totally agree that I want to open it up here, and my hope is that we talk roughly about how to proceed, and open it up to any questions here, being aware that if you want to name yourself, otherwise you won't be seen on the screen, or you can be anonymous or whatever, so we'll open it up.
and then ask us a question, and then we'll direct it, just to help make sure we're doing it smoothly.
And try to focus on the future, not the past election or whatever, please, thank you.
And I need to have some dates from people, or your email addresses or whatever, well, I have yours, so that I can give the find out from the county clerk when it would be a good time for a group.
Yeah.
I've assumed 6 of us.
So well, maybe others here too, or maybe Jonathan.
Well, I don't know how many they can I don't know if
Well,
you know
yeah,
how big it is.
we'll need to kind of figure that out, and I think we.
They can handle 6.
Yeah, I mean, it might be 6 of us, but Jonathan and I may be out of town and 2 others could have been, or I'm just
okay.
throwing that out there as my thought, but, yeah.
Yeah. I
Okay.
will, if it's okay with everybody, I'll contact the clerk's office and find out a good time for us to go.
Is that okay with everybody, audience included?
I think she's
Well,
saying
they can make a separate appointment, maybe.
Well, no, I'm talking about them
Everybody.
being engaged in replacing me, for example, or Rita, if she can't make it, or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
To accommodate 6 or 8 of us, or whatever it is, so, yeah, I'm trying to, okay,
So
audience.
if you have a question, just raise your
Yeah.
hand and we'll call on you.
I got a couple, and I'm gonna remain anonymous here, is, we were talking earlier about, the voting and what inclement weather might happen to keep people from coming. There are many states within the United States, and people may agree or not, that have some form of supervised early voting, in person, showing ID. So in order to take care of the weather issue, let's say Oregon goes to 5 days early voting ID, paper ballot. That takes care of that issue. And that's just, you might extend it a little, you might shorten it up a little, that's just some little details
Yeah,
that can be taken care
yeah,
of.
I appreciate that thought, and I think that would be among the things that we could consider. I want to kind of consider how we deal with this in the future, not address specific ideas, because there's probably 1 million of them in this room. So, yeah, how to deal with it in some sort of a fashion, a democratic fashion, a broad horizontal
I thought that
fashion.
was a great way to deal with it.
But
But that is.
That is a good idea. I mean, yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
so,
I just-
and then on top of that is, that I think for election integrity, for the voters in the state of Oregon to ensure, and for everybody to feel that these elections are safe and secure, and most of all, fair, to do an audit. If it comes out that everything's kosher, great. We know our system works. But if in fact it comes out that we have some small issues, those can be identified and corrected. If we have larger issues, then we need to discuss on where we need to go from that point.
Yeah, that's a legitimate point. I think that's something that we
Yeah.
could address, definitely.
Okay, so I
Yeah.
think he suggested to propose, how can we do this in the future? Do we want then to discuss it now, or are we putting this out for future discussions? But, you know, the one-day voting was proposed, the weather was saying, well, we maybe can't do it, and he's proposing, well, what if you know, have a few days prior to that where you can come? And then the second one was an audit. So do we want to discuss that, or?
Well, I don't think we could, I think there should be a bunch of other ideas. My thought
Proposed
is
too.
we try to form some kind of an alliance of some sort to have these discussions. The kind of thing you're talking about would take approval by the county. I don't know what's involved. They may say yay, they may say no, I don't know. But that's the kind of thing that I think as we, the people, we could propose if that's.
Oh, so maybe you're suggesting, hey, what can we do forward with these people who are concerned?
Right.
And those topics could be discussed at future.
Right, yeah, I don't think we're gonna get it all settled today. Yeah, I didn't think
So
we
you
did.
think we should have another meeting like this on election integrity?
Well, that's on something, yeah. I think Jonathan
have
was
to have a topic.
referring to a horizontal kind of collection, and this is a good beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, this whole business that we're facing is a lot bigger than the 20 of us or something, but yeah, let's try to get it moving, and I appreciate everybody's involvement. Somebody else had a question back there, yeah.
R9 from Arnold Falls. So how do we get a way to get an independent opinion on what everyone can buy into? You know, and we do this through the courts, we do it through Secretary of State. What kind of things can we do to get everybody at least agreeing that they've had their say heard?
That's the question, isn't it? How do we actually form some sort of a horizontal alliance? And, you know, I don't know, but I think we should try to
Talk about it.
figure it out. I guess that's,
I think we need to have a definition of what we accept as evidence of something. Because if they put out a report, put out an audit or a study,
If people
We
don't
have to
believe
have-
it, what's the
we
point?
have to have some
Yeah.
standard to say,
Right.
this is
our,
evidence.
our Constitution sets very high standards for accusing people and prosecuting people and proving people guilty of things. So if that evidence is coming up, yeah, if the election was stolen, if corruption, I think, I don't know, speaking for myself, I want those people identified and prosecuted,
Yes.
whatever they did. So, yeah, I'm sort of a law and order guy, although I'm liberal.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
In a
We've-
society, you have to have laws.
We've tried to appeal to our local government, our commissioners, our clerks, and we absolutely get nowheres with the things that we're finding. And then our laws have been passed, don't clean the voter rolls. So it's,
So are they shrugging and saying there's not a problem, therefore we're not concerned?
they're just saying we don't have to.
Yeah, because they trust the process.
I think if a unified panel, of left and right approach, then they might have a little different response. And, I mean, that's my hope, that's my belief. I think corruption isn't running profoundly through our system. It's a combination of other things, including business interests and profits that are kind of creating an unintentional conspiracy where we're just sort of dismissed by fighting each other. I probably didn't make that clear because I'm not quite sure what I'm saying, but
Well, at the very beginning of what you just said, let me see if I understand you, that you're thinking if there's more people who have this concern and go before them, you think they're more
yeah,
likely
a
to?
bipartisan election, I
Recognize.
think so. I mean, Jonathan, Faith, you guys have other people here have political experience. county director was here a while ago, Chuck Wells. Chuck, do you have something to say?
Yeah, I'd like to offer a little historical perspective and a comment. My first election, general election, I voted for Harry Truman. So I've seen a bit of elections over the years and different ways of dealing with it. And it comes down to a couple of sayings that sort of sum it up. One is that eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. And if you have a citizenry that doesn't pay attention to what's going on, you deserve what you get and you lose your
Yep.
And so the real thing is that trust is the coin of the realm, not money.
Yeah.
And we need to really focus on how do we gain some mutual trust. The reason we're here is trying to do that, I assume, and I hope. And so if we can take those two quotations, so I think maybe we've got to pursue this. But I'm trying to say that we have squelched civics as a study in elementary and secondary school. And seeing that being squeezed over the years as an educator, I've seen people being isolated from the process just because there isn't a facility to provide that. And I think that we have to keep that in mind. So this is kind of a cheerleader remark for Braver Angel.
Awesome.
I'm almost positive Chuck is the only person besides me, Chuck, who's older than I am. And I've spoken with him before, along with a few others of you in here. I have a suggestion that we ask the participants, the audience, what we should do next, rather than me trying to make up, yeah. Yes, sir.
So, I have one suggestion. So, I'm a 28-year-old millennial, and one thing I've noticed ever since I've gotten in politics the last couple of years is that my generation and the younger Gen Z generation does not get involved in our political system at all. They're too scared of bias or judgmental opinions and so forth. So why not, for the future, create programs that help both Democratic and Republican younger voters being able to come out and being able to talk about things more often, such as like in schools, like in high school government classes, and even colleges, and being able to respect one another and being able to come together more peacefully.
Yes, we are planning an event, actually, forgot our own agenda, September 10th. We're planning to have some kind of an event where individuals, we're going to try to identify equal numbers of reds and blues to engage in principled and controlled and civil conversations to try to do that. We're shooting for September 10th. We haven't exactly...
For young people?
Well, any people.
Any.
I mean, more,
Any.
I don't see, I don't know, no African Americans, and maybe no Hispanic, Mexican Americans, maybe no, whatever. You had more diversity, definitely youth. We need, we have liberals and conservatives here, but we need, there's more to the country than that. And so, I guess
Well, and like Chuck in the audience was saying, thank you, that these kind of opportunities Braver Angels presenting is to help us gain more trust of one another and see each other as people and understand each other as we come together to solve the problem. So, yeah. So
Can I ask a clarification question? Do you think young people would come to an event where they can discuss their issues?
If they feel that it would probably be more comfortable for them, that they're not being judged, like for example, a lot of Trump supporters, for example, in my generation are highly judged in colleges and so forth. If they feel more comfortable coming out and
And
gives them more
how
security.
do we do that for the September 10th event?
For the September 10th event, my idea is to kind of encourage them, both sides. I'm actually thinking, for example, Republican and Democratic PCPs, for instance, can actually come together in unison and encourage people to come out and to talk about things civilly. So that way maybe they can kind of see a more united front.
Okay.
Yeah, we need to establish a united front.
Yeah.
But agreed, yes, Todd.
I think what you guys are doing as Braver Angels is being a model in the community. And I think this is gonna fit a lot of forums and be a real benefit here to all age groups in the community, so, thank you.
Yeah, let's bring it back within the Braver Angels realm. I mean, what we're doing here is radical in the sense of their format, and I feel like we pulled it off. I don't feel like I've been made a fool like I probably should have been, but I really appreciate what the participation and achievement here today.
Doesn't Braver Angels suggest that you meet a couple red and blue in a living room and have a casual conversation there before you do something in public like this?
Yes, and that's what we're contemplating for September 10th. So, and how how many we could accommodate and so forth. My own goal would be the more the merrier, but yeah, I am open.
But it's hard to
I
have
speak
this-
for Kristen, she'll hit me if I do.
It's hard to have a conversation in a big group. You have to, you would have to
Yeah.
break up into smaller
Yeah,
groups.
try to pair people up in
Yeah.
some way. Influential people, great, let's get this thing going. If we don't have an election we trust in 2024, it scares the bejesus out of me, and I think a lot of people, so.
So going back to that topic, we're still looking for suggestions of what can we do? I know that Rita has created a group of people who are concerned, who are working together, who are canvassing and going out, who reached out to the local, clerks and so forth, trying to get information. And so in my mind, I see, let's come together and figure out what are, like we've presented today, our concerns and what can we move forward to, that vigilance that's not stop this from rolling forward, to bring forward those suggestions that we can then present to the powers that be.
Can I
Dawn
ask,
asked the
could I
question
ask,
first.
when this is done, I'm not sure where it's going, but I would like to have access to it to give it to the clerk's staff and the county clerk, so that they can see what we did here before we tour.
Yeah, we'll discuss that,
Yeah,
yeah.
at this point, Kurt has it, and I promised Braver Angels they could have it, and I have no capacity to do anything with it. So I am open to as much access as possible, and so far I'm proud and happy with
I
what
just
I've
think
seen.
that would make the clerk's staff know where we're coming from.
Dawn?
I'm just stating that this is all just conversation. If we don't do something right now, it's just conversation, and everything that they've tried to get done, which is the ballots from the clerk, that has been delayed and delayed and delayed for months and months, just gets thrown away. There's no proof. We've been talking for how many years about this stuff? And I believe if Klamath doesn't take the lead, you want to take the lead nationally? Then let's go to precinct voting by paper in the garages like they used to and see what happens. In comparison to everybody else in the country that's going to use the voting machines again, which I do not trust any farther than I could throw any one of you. I just think we're never going to see it again, because we may have a civil war next year or the next year, because nobody is doing anything, they're just talking.
And I
That's
think
my
this
thought.
is a good place that we're doing the talking together, right?
Right.
Instead of our own little groups discussing it. Alan, did you have something?
Someone mentioned breaking off into tables groups. The Fellowship Church does that on Men's Night on Monday, once a month. And it's a fantastic idea, because the 5 or 6 people at each table get together and talk, and then come up with different ideas, and then attach it to the group as a whole. And you then can plot direction on what's most important, what needs to be addressed first, and go from there. It gives you a type of a format, so to speak, of what the groups are really interested in hearing and what matters the most with the city folks. And a comment on this young man, the colleges, I think the community college had flyers that I saw when things were happening, and they were distributing them in the businesses in town. And I know the internet's a great source, but to be able to get it out right away, the paper copies work good at the locations that they visit, and once one sees it, they put it on the internet, and they spread the word. So it's just a matter of spreading the word. And also the flyers were designed in a way to catch the eye of the young people.
Right.
Design is a very important issue, because if it's designed like we design it, it would never get their attention. So design is a very important thing to be addressed.
And social media.
Yeah, a couple more, and I guess we need to start summing up here. Three more, okay, the three people that have put up their hands, we'll start over here on the right. Pam?
Kathleen Adams from Klamath Falls. I just want to thank you, Chuck, for making this happen, and I want to thank all of you for the preparation that you clearly put into this. I really appreciate it. It's been very interesting and informative for me. And I think the next step is to do more of this.
Yeah, but what I've done is nothing compared to what my father did in World War II. So, anyway, yes, I've forgotten your name already, sir.
Oh, sorry, Jacob Beck,
Jacob.
Republican Precinct Committee Person for Precinct 7. So I sort of agree with Jonathan's suggestion about making our representatives held accountable, and I have one idea on that. So what about creating a record of all our legislations, their viewpoints, their voting record, what each bill has, and in the future, developing a system or a political information network, if you will, that voters can actually see what each of their representatives have done during their time in office, as well as what they can, what their viewpoints are in being able to vote that way.
So you're ready to do that for us, are you? I mean,
It's already been done.
oh, okay, well,
There is such a thing
Yeah.
called Vote Smart.
And the Living Ballotpedia and the League of Women Voters.
Hey,
Is it really in detail though, for all the voters
Yes,
really want their
all their
information?
votes, all their votes. I don't know what else you were thinking of wanting to know.
Creating essentially a new system that would allow, like I was saying, to make sure that people understand what each of their representatives stand for, their voting record while in office, and being able to see each piece one by one.
That's what's there.
Go to the Secretary of State's office too, and they show it, they list it.
That, I'm talking something more deeper, actually, than that.
how to do that is a good question, and whether it exists is a good question.
If you look on the bill, it'll show you who voted what.
Yes, but what I'm kind of talking about is creating a more centralized system for our state. So for instance, let's just say you're elected, okay? I'm gonna give a hypothetical example, okay? And so, let's say I'm your profile, okay? You'll have your political affiliation, you'll have all your viewpoints, a lot of your arguments, a picture of you, and then you'll even have every single vote that you've done in office, as well as a link directly to the legislative website that shows the bill and then your own description and reasoning of why you voted. So that way your constituents would see your side more and going more in detail on that. Because in that way, when the next vote comes around, if people disagree with you or if they like you, they could judge your vote more accurately that way.
I think the representatives' websites does that quite well.
I think we have things in
Yes.
place that are highly similar to that, but
Very similar.
Okay,
maybe we can look at that.
Art, what I'd like to do is ask Kurt, our technician guy, and Todd to maybe address some of the ideas that have been presented about social media and what we can do with what we've done today. So Art, one more, and then I'd like to kind of end it with that, and if people want to stay and go on, I want to put an end to Kurt's assignment here.
I have to go at 12.
Okay, and Jonathan has to leave. Art?
I'll just add to what Catherine said. I appreciate you, Chuck, for taking the time to do this. There's been a lot of attempts to get people together, and it could be all kinds of things, but it's always hard to get people together that don't agree, and that's a substantial thing.
Kudos.
Well, thank you.
Done, but
I'm motivated by my granddaughter, Callie, who I'm totally infatuated with, and I worry about her future. So, thank you. And, okay, Todd?
He's not done.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I want to follow on to that. Just that was a lead up to making a suggestion, but maybe a little bit more structure in some of these things. That maybe a little bit
I'm
more
bad at that.
timing of things, and so you could shorten it or.
Yeah, this is our practice round, so
Yeah.
we're taking suggestions on
Yeah,
how to do that.
Yeah, this is outside the bounds. We made it up together somehow, patchwork, so apologize for
Yeah,
that
I
part.
think like what you were saying, the suggestion of that maybe too much time to give the problem solution, so there was too much and we didn't get to narrow down on it. But-
Can I make a suggestion? Go to the League of Women Voters and look at how they structure candidate forums.
Yeah,
And did you have more, Art, on that?
No,
Okay.
that's it.
okay, Jonathan and Kurt, maybe you could add some stuff to this in terms of what they do, in terms of social media.
Yeah, I think yes.
Todd, you're ready. Go.
ahead, Kurt.
Well, the best solution in terms of getting people connected, it's great to have an in-group session, but a lot of people are not going to come out, whether it's work or just schedules, is to live stream activities like this, utilizing Ecamm Live, which we're currently utilizing for recording only, but instead put this through Restream, which would allow us to stream on any sort of platforms that we want, whether it's Twitch, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, whatever, on multiple platforms simultaneously, and post it on, if there's a Klamath County Republican Facebook page and Democratic page, we can stream it on both simultaneously, or we can just stream it to YouTube and have those linked in. That way there's also an online forum where people can post questions live during the course of the presentation.
And your ideas are now being recorded for braver angels to see, is that right?
So it's very easy to do. I've been the main live streaming person in this community for the last 2 years as soon as the pandemic hit. We've been doing things like live streaming dance recitals, graduations, concerts at the Ross Ragland extensively for the last 2 years. And so this next month will be the third year in a row that we live stream and put on demand the Klamath Independent Film Festival. So people who can't attend in person can watch online from the convenience of home. We have the technological capacity when the pandemic hit. If there's anything that came out of the pandemic, I'm sure we could probably nitpick things, but it is that live streaming capacity, technology, and platforms have drastically expanded over the last 2 years, where there's, and also audiences have become more comfortable with participating remotely.
Right.
So people, through a lot of binging of Netflix or whatever they did to survive for the last 2 years, became a lot more comfortable in watching events live remotely. And so I would recommend streaming this live as opposed to just simply recording it and making that available as a cross-platform repost. So we could just establish it, say, on one YouTube channel and then make sure that the various Facebook pages or Instagram feeds or whoever is administering different platforms are all reposting that so that it is live, and there is a main forum that people can submit questions and comments to online as well.
Okay, so Jeff, our Oregon leadership of Braver Angels, I agree with whatever Kurt said.
Our Quaker lady left. I was going to ask them, as the Unitarians, we do it both ways. In case someone feels sick during COVID and they want to watch on Zoom, we have our services live and in person and on Zoom. So if there's inclement weather or people feel sick, they can still watch their church service. I know the Quakers are doing that upstairs, but I'm not sure if they're live streaming.
Yeah.
But that would.
That Zoom is also an opportunity. I've even live streamed weddings on Zoom where there was 8 people present, including me, and 300 people watching on Zoom.
Oh my gosh.
So there's many platforms that you could do it on. I just want to make sure that if we do live stream, that it is equal audience opportunity.
Right.
So like if there's a Klamath County Democratic Facebook page and a Klamath County Republican page, that it's being streamed on both platforms and people have an opportunity to comment, participate.
Yeah, Todd?
And also Braver Angels website here locally in Klamath Falls is Unusual Courage. Is it .com?
Yeah, but that's not exactly a Braver Angels web, and we're going to have our own, that's one I made up before I realized Braver Angels would do it for me, which I think will start very soon, now that we're in alliance, but thank you, Todd, and you helped me with that, and maybe something will come of it when I have time. Yes, one more here.
So is this meeting going to be available someplace online?
I sure hope
Yeah,
so, and
We don't know yet.
that's my recommendation to Braver Angels. I don't have, maybe Klamath Film can do it, but I want to make sure, I believe, I predict that Braver Angels will endorse this and put it there, and I don't know what it'll be, but when we have your email addresses, I'll let you know, and we will remember September 10th, that isn't very far away, and hopefully we can really get something going. My thought was that's when things really kick off.
Chuck, I will upload the video of this by this afternoon on a Google Drive link and email that to you. You can then distribute that link out to anyone who can download it and then post it at their convenience on Facebook pages, on YouTube, on whatever platform they like.
Okay, and if I manage to somehow slip up and send it to all these people, and Braver Angels, maybe, who knows, and I've said too much.
Well, thanks again for coming. I do hope, like Dawn was suggesting, that this does roll our ball forward, and all of you that signed in here will not only come to the next Braver Angel kickoff event, but that we create more of a election integrity group that wants to help, solve the problems that we might see here, and we can have more discussions. So please reach out to us directly if you want to be involved in that, and we'll probably ask you in an email as well.
And Jacob or anybody else who can help, we can use it. So, I mean, when it comes to some, we're trying to set up a charter. We intend to do that soon. It'll be like a board of directors here. We need a lot more, and I'm not quite sure what we need, but we plan to.
Are your email addresses on those brochures?
I will be sending, and our emails are going to change very soon when this Braver Angel thing, I think it'll be done this week. So watch out for that. You'll be getting notices from me maybe under my regular email address, and then.
Can we do one more?
Well, thank you.